Hello, Internet, and welcome to the inaugural episode of what we're going to call, perhaps not to our best judgment, A Town Called Castard.
Yes.
Yes, Chris got his wish. It sounds a little bit like A Town Called Custard.
Which is also brilliant.
I mean, that is quite good, because custard's pretty good.
I like custard.
I like custard. So on A Town Called Castard, what we'll be mainly doing is talking about custard and how good it is on particular things. Although some things cream is better on. Well, yeah, I'd rather have cream on. Let's actually stop talking about custard and cream now, because that's a bit weird. What we're going to do, every single time we record one of these, we'll have some different anonymous gameplay going on in the background. You may have already spotted that happening right now, which may or may not have something to do with the actual content of what we're talking about, which will mostly probably be video games, but may end up diversifying a bit when the channel itself diversifies a bit. Hint coming soon. So for today, what we're going to cover as a kind of sequel to our Games of 2014 feature that not enough people watched.
Guilt. Internet guilt.
We're going to be talking about some of the also-rans from 2014, the games that didn't quite make it onto our list because of timing or abject failure, or just because they didn't quite cut it. No.
Yep.
And the first one of those is the one you're watching me play right now, Dragon Age Inquisition. So, Dragon Age, AAA BioWare fantasy RPG fodder. However, its formula's changed up quite a bit since the last two installations of it, particularly since the first one. So the first Dragon Age Origins, was a kind of more traditional top-down RPG in the fashion of older BioWare games, where a lot of the combat is kind of meant to be more tactical, more kind of it's one of these older style BioWare games, and it kind of is turn-based, but only insofar as the turns are a certain length of time and you can pause at any point within those turns. So not completely freeform, despite what it may seem. And that did pretty well. It was pretty popular particularly among PC RPGers. And then came Dragon Age 2, which is widely castigated by internet in general and PC RPGers in particular, because they like to over-dramatize things and over-exaggerate things, because it's nowhere near as bad as they say it is, and does a lot of quite interesting things with character and story. But we're not here to talk about Origins and Dragon Age 2. We're here to talk about Dragon Age Inquisition. The main reason Dragon Age Inquisition did not make it onto my end-of-year list is because I hadn't played enough of it, and it's a huge game and I wanted to do it justice. Also because towards the beginning of the game in particular, the control system on PC is so clunky, so unbelievably clunky, and it was leaving me as much frustrated as I was enjoying it. However, after more time with it, I think probably about 40 hours by now, I've settled into it a lot more. The controls are still clunky, but it's doing a lot better, and the very fact that I've said I've only settled into it after 40 hours will tell you exactly whether this game is for you, probably. It's rather interesting. It takes that kind of traditional RPG format, introduces elements from games like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, in that you end up with massive maps on which you can roam, and there's icons, and you pick up things, and you do things, and you find collectibles and all the rest of it, and there's quests and main story missions. But it also has a degree of... it certainly feels quite MMO, albeit being completely single player. The main campaign is completely single player.
Yeah, I certainly spotted that kind of, hang on, it looks like when I was watching the gameplay of it, because I'm not watching the gameplay now because that would require time travel, or you having a decent internet connection.
Yes.
When I was watching the thing, it's like, hang on, this gentleman is chaining quests. He's collecting everything here.
Yeah.
And there's quest indicators coming up. Oh, I see what's happening here. This is a massive multiplayer offline role-playing game. More because same initialism, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it totally is. It is totally exactly that thing. That's not a bad thing. If, big caveat, you like MMOs, which I do, and most of my MMO play has been single player in one form or another. It's definitely, I mean, it does more for the single player than a regular MMO would. You know, there's cutscenes, there's characters you can talk to, there's quite a robust crafting system. There's all kinds of interesting stuff going on. There's a lot of really great exploration, and while there's a lot of MMOs out there that do exploration well, one of them being Lord of the Rings Online that me and Chris are big fans of, a lot of them don't do exploration quite the way that Dragon Age Inquisition does it. These are massive areas, just unbelievably huge.
Hang on, can I just stop there, because I want to make I want to just say a thing, and I want to see what happens, because this all sounds like, I'm not too sure of the timeline, so excuse me. This all sounds like they set out to make Baldur's Gate 703. They made it. They then made a sequel to it. Then Skyrim happened, and then they Skyrim'd the Dragon Age.
I couldn't agree more. It is the Dragon Age answer to something like Skyrim.
Well, I like Skyrim, so maybe I would like this. But looking at this, looking at the thing, it just seems. And what annoyed me about Origins, and I have not finished playing Origins, is there's just so much micromanagement. And I know there are people out there who love this, but there are people out there who get off on.
No, you'd get on much better if you don't like the micromanagement of combat. You'd get on much better with Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition. So, let's recap a bit and talk about the combat of this game and the combat of the series in general. As I said, Dragon Age Origins is more of a paused, tactical, top-down RPG thing. You can play it without that, but it's boring. Because the combat just doesn't support that kind of action RPG play. Dragon Age 2 provided a kind of hybrid system in that if you wanted, you could turn it to a lower difficulty and just play it like an action RPG. Much kind of like how Skyrim plays, I suppose, although obviously it's not first person. Dragon Age Inquisition beefs that up even more, in that the tactical system, while really clunky, feels a bit more naturalistic than Dragon Age 2, and the action RPG thing is even more action RPG. Put it this way, in this game, when you're not paused and in the tactical camera in this, you attack by just repeatedly clicking your left mouse button.
Yay!
So it's got that kind of Diablo spam going. That won't trigger your special powers, you have to like hotkey those and do stuff. But it plays... I mean, it plays quite similarly to, you know, like an MMO or to a kind of Diablo clone or something like that. So you would probably more enjoy the combat in this. Just tune it down to a lower difficulty and play it like an action RPG.
What are you implying?
That you prefer action RPG play to slower micromanagement, tactical.
At games.
No, not at all. It's just a different kind of game, Chris.
That's worse than calling me a racist.
I would never call you a racist, though you totally
But you're saying you would call me terrible at games. I think we should move on.
Yeah. So anyway,
There's a shred of friendship left.
Dragon Age Inquisition does a lot of things right and does a lot of things really in a really interesting way. Opens up the world. The world itself is massive and interesting and hugely explorable. I believe the very first area you get to is bigger than every area in Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 put together.
Lorks.
And it's... and I got to that and I was like, oh, right, so this is like the central hub. No. There's loads of areas as big as that. And they're packed. They're packed full of stuff. I wonder what's down this trail. Well, it'll be a mini dungeon, or a set of quests, or just a weird little thing to find, or or a fortress full of mercenaries for you to like, conquer, like a little raid.
Like Skyrim style, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
But like Skyrim style, but a lot less random generation. Like, this has been built. You get the impression with a lot of Skyrim interiors, rightly or wrongly maybe, that they're more or less kind of random cave generation or what have you. Dragon Age Inquisition has been constructed. Every inch of it has been constructed. And filled in a certain way and is full of character. In that it has... I mean, I prefer this game to Skyrim. I mean, I'll lay that down right there. And not just because the combat is more my thing or what have you. I think it does open world exploration stuff better than Skyrim does it.
Okay.
So there we go.
Which is one of the major things of Skyrim, so yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you like it. Maybe I'll give it a go when it's available for €5.
Yeah, although I would say you would get a lot more out of this game. It's a BioWare game. You'd get a lot more out of it if you had played Origins and Dragon Age 2, certainly plot-wise and the world and everything like that. But, I'm still trying to get you to finish the Mass Effect trilogy, so let's do one thing at a time, yeah?
Yeah, baby steps.
Okay, that's probably enough ranting about Dragon Age Inquisition. It may turn up in my best games of 2015, who knows? So, with that in mind, let's move on. Christopher, I believe there's a game that our viewers may be familiar with that you want to mention.
I wanted to not so much include this as an also ran, but I wanted to explain to everyone why Borderlands 1.5 or the pre-sequel is not on the top 10 games of last year list. And I think we kind of summed it up really neatly when we spoke about it a couple of months ago on camera during the Borderlands, and you said it perfectly. The problem with Borderlands 1.5 is Borderlands 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just... I'm not saying the game isn't fun. I'm enjoying the playthrough. It still has the same kinetics, but it feels like we have taken the flesh of Borderlands 2 and filled it with a slightly lower grade meat.
Yes.
Certainly we don't find ourselves laughing half as much as we did during Borderlands 2.
No.
Maybe a victim of its own success? I don't know.
Perhaps. I think it's difficult to tell because usually when this kind of thing happens, you think, oh, well, it's just a formula and they were following the formula and they forgot to put the padding. But it almost feels like they slightly forgot the formula.
Yeah.
In a way, I don't know. It's a combination of a number of things, If we'd played the pre-sequel directly after Borderlands 1, we'd have been really impressed. But Borderlands 2 is just so big and so rich and so consistently funny all the way through. Every quest pop-up is funny. Every time anyone talks to you is funny. Some concepts or quests alone is funny. Ultimately, the pre-sequel does not have anything as quick and simple and guffaw-inducing as something like Face McShooty. Which, if you haven't played Borderlands 2, will mean nothing to you. But it's just those little things. And, it adds a lot, or it adds quite a few mechanisms and systems, but none of them really click.
Yeah, and I know... maybe a victim of its own success, but also another... I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't think there's been a situation where a property has been swapped between studios, staying on the same format, notwithstanding the GTA handheld games, which were all fantastic. Staying on the same format has passed between studios and kept its momentum and kept... And provided because that's like the writing staff was almost exactly the same here, was it not?
I believe the writing team from Borderlands 2, or a significant portion of the writing team from Borderlands 2, handled quite a lot of the writing for the pre-sequel. I believe that's the case. I know that Anthony Birch, who's the lead writer on Borderlands 2 of Hey Ash, What You Playing fame, I know he was one of the primary writers on pre-sequel.
He's really good and really funny.
And it's not that pre-sequel is without its moments of funniness, but compared to Borderlands 2,
it's Monty Python versus Not the 9 O'Clock News, to make a reference that I'm actually too old to get, or too young to get even. And I think it's a shame. I think there's still a lot of traction in the game world. I think, personally, I think Borderlands needs to move away from Pandora, Elpis, and Promethea and go and tell me about... I want a space opera. I want to see how this world fits together. They have in their discussion of this dystopian backwater really enthused me about what happens elsewhere in space. How do the ships move around? How big are the ships? Who owns what? Who's fighting? Give me Mass Effect, but with
Chris in spaceship lust. Shocker.
Well,
I know what you mean, though. I do know what you mean, and I think, I think they've got to break the formula again to get it going, because ultimately, I think if they try to do Borderlands 2 again, they'll Borderlands 2 is just so consistent. I can't see them pulling off the same trick again.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll be interesting. Obviously, if you don't give a shit about story or funny or anything like that, pre-sequel will push exactly the same buttons for you as Borderlands 2 did. There is nothing wrong with the systems in the game. The new ones aren't necessary, but the combat is as gloriously moment-to-moment chaotic as ever. The gun system is, still crazy but fun. It's just, it doesn't all hang together in the same way that Borderlands 2 did.
The difficult third album, maybe. If Borderlands 1 was them getting the system, Borderlands 2 was them filling the system with delicious meat, Borderlands 3 is them trying a different kind of meat and not quite getting it right.
Yeah, or taking it out of the oven before it's fully cooked.
Yeah, because they're so keen to put it in their faces. God, I'm hungry.
Yeah. Can we eat? Can we eat this podcast?
No, we can't.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
If you could 3D print, we can't 3D print. We could. No, wait. We can.
Can we 3D print the internet and eat it?
This is what I'm getting at. In one of my more recent SimCity videos, I discussed why we can't have double-decker runways, and I thought that's a great idea that someone should come up with, but I've just had another idea. I can eat this podcast because you can 3D print food now. You can get printers that squirt icing, so all I need to do is render the waveform down into a CAD program. Boom. I just made food noise.
Great. Let's do that. That'll finally make us famous.
Yeah, we'll get on Boing Boing.
Yeah.
Everything that gets 3D printed goes on Boing Boing.
Yeah. Moving on then. So that was Borderlands, and I guess the last of these auto-rans that's going into the pot will be a game that didn't come out in 2014. I can't be arsed looking when it came out, but I'm going to guess 2012, which is Gone Home. Which I obviously felt I had enough indie credential on my list to not include it. Gone Home is I guess what many places are calling a walking simulator nowadays. So the premise is you are a 21-year-old young woman. You're coming home from studying in Europe or going on like an away year in Europe or something like that. And you're coming back home, and you turn up at the house, and there's in the middle of a thunderstorm, and no one's home. And basically, you have to explore the house and find out kind of what's been going on with your family in your absence. And that's basically the premise of the entire game. If you play through and find absolutely everything in the house, it probably takes about 2 hours. So it's not a big game by any stretch of the imagination. Literally all that happens is you wander around the house, you pick stuff up, you can read some things, and you get kind of audio diaries that play for you from all from the perspective of your little sister. And it's a gorgeous little game. I don't mean that in terms of graphical ability. It looks nice for an indie game. But it's never going to be a world beater in those stakes. But it crafts this lovely little story, and most of its atmosphere comes right from the fact that it's set in the early to mid 90s, and it is absolutely bleeding with nostalgia for people who were around in the did I say early to mid to late 90s, whatever, that kind of period. It's just the little things, like you go to your family's living room and you can look and see the videos that they've been recording off the TV, like people did. I hate to tell all you young people out there like that, and they all have like X-Files written on the spine, and it's just, it reminds me of my teenage years quite a lot. And there's a lot of your little sister is into Riot Girl music. So there's this whole thing about you can put tapes in and play songs, and there's zines, and just it really bleeds nostalgia for that period of time, and frankly nostalgia for being a teenager in the 90s. And it's just this lovely story of what it is to be a teenager, and all about kind of teenagers growing up, and teenage identity and teenage sexuality, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just a really important game to be made, because that kind of stuff really isn't commented on much by games, and it's just lovely little story thing. but didn't quite make it into my top 5, I guess.
So I pulled up some facts on it. It was released in August 2013.
Nearly
Pertinency ahoy! The Wii U version of it is due in September, October 2015.
Oh wow! Surprisingly, it's taken long to adapt.
It was one of the few good games written in the Unity engine. And I don't know. I just think you may have a soft spot for kind of cell shaded impressionist video games.
It's not cell shaded.
It certainly looks cell shaded.
It's definitely. It doesn't look cell shaded in action.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's just there's not very many screenshots in the Wikipedia page. It's quite small. Half of it is references. Well, yeah. You're a digital hipster.
I'm not a digital. You're anti-intellectual snob.
I feast on your rage.
This is odd. It's really odd. If this game was a TV show or a film, no one would be making a fuss about the content. But because and people do make I know you're being mostly sarcastic. People have made a massive fuss about the content of Gone Home and whether it's a game and blah 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 blah. We discussed a bit of stuff like that on the with Little Inferno on the games of the year. But there's a real, I think, fear among gamers that if games start coming out that are just weird little coming of age stories, for some reason Halo will be taken away. And it's bizarre. It's like someone saying, "Oh, I hate the fact that my so-called life," he said, making another 90s reference, that my so-called life means Star Trek will go away. It's so weird. It's so weird. I don't know why gamers do it.
It's because we are...
Well, it's their little world being threatened, right?
It's not just that. It's game. When we talk about gamers, what we really mean are North American middle-class white people.
Well, not just North American and not just middle class and probably not just white, but
but that's the target demographic.
Yes,
that's the thing about that demographic is its incessant necessity of competition, and inside that, the necessity of every single interchange being a zero-sum game. Everything is won or lost. There is no...
I hate this game because it could have been another game that's completely different that I want. What?
And exactly what you said. I hate this game because this game's existence means that there is competition against the game I like. The narrative of this entire generation is absolutely seated in this American high school brainwashing, hyper-competitive... habits, this philosophy of win or die, and it's really it's just harmful. And I'm glad these short kind of narrative games are being made, and I'm kind of glad that people are asking, are they games? Because people asking them, are they games, is people asking Dali paintings if they're art. It's good that this is happening. It means the art form is an art form and is functional and is healthy, and I think it's going to grow out of it well. But yeah, no spaceships, no explosions, not going on my wish list, sorry.
Oh, you're as bad as them. Yeah. Oddly, I think you'd quite enjoy it. It'll probably make you cry again. Yeah, and I guess that's it. I guess that's our games that didn't quite make our list. More of these, obviously, we're going to aim to try and get an episode of A Town Called Castard. Oh, God.
It's so good.
Yeah. We're going to try and get an episode of this out most weeks. Some of them will be covering specific topics, and other ones will just be kind of ramblings over the video gaming or other gaming or whatever events of the week. And we may be joined by other people. You'll have some of you may have noticed that we have at least one more contributor on A Town Called Bastard now, with Mr. Neil, who is on the Dawn of War series that's just started up, and we may get some other people on as well. Other guest stars, famous people, or at least our friends pretending to be famous.
Not as good as Chris. None of them are as good as Chris. I am Chris. Comment, like, subscribe, and watch this more than you watched the flipping end of the year game review, you ungrateful gobshites.
Yeah, and then go back and watch that again. as well.
Also, maybe start a new YouTube account so they count double towards our views, basically.
Yeah.
Please validate us.
We put so much effort into this. We're wasting our life. Anyway, that's great. That's all great. So, join us for more Town Called Castard. Probably next week sometime, maybe.
Yay,
Bye.
Future. Bye-bye.